All right, there it is. You know when that music plays, what's about to happen. We are live at Texans training camp, day 6. We had padded practice yesterday. We're getting a padded practice today.
We are. Yes,
oh,
we are.
yeah.
Yes,
there we go. That voice. You know that voice. Joining us here on Payne and Pendergast, Texans Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio joining us out here live right next to the practice field. Nick, it's great to see you.
Good morning. Great to see you. It's good to be here.
Good to be here. I'm going to ask this early. We're going to be going to West Virginia next week, getting in on Sunday. Will there be a SummerSlam watch party at the Greenbrier?
It's funny. I actually watched the tail end of Raw last night to see the card. So whether or not we make it to SummerSlam or watch SummerSlam, we'll see.
Okay.
But looks like it should be pretty exciting.
It'll be good.
Hopefully the weather holds up, rains or anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so we just played in a segment or two ago. We played Sheldon Rankins yesterday, did media, and he was asked about comparing the team he was here with in 2023 to this team. And I loved his answer because he said, the culture here now is set. D'Amico doesn't have to instruct us on every little thing. How are you feeling right now? Like year 3 of you and D'Amico together and CJ here, obviously. Is that an accurate assessment of where you guys are now culture-wise and everything compared to where it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, we're 3 years into the program now, and I think anytime you start something new or start something kind of in the infantile stages, like that was D'Amico's first season. So really what he's trying to do is implement the foundation, the principles. Here's what it takes. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what we want. Make sure we get that message to the players. And ultimately it's about the players to implement that on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. And so now we have 2 years under our belt going into year 3. Have a number of players that have been here in the system now for multiple years. Rank's a good example of a player who was here, left, now he came back. So I think the players have an understanding of what the expectation is on a day-to-day basis. And the best teams are usually the player-driven teams.
Yeah.
Because in the end, you're relying on one another on a day-to-day basis and ultimately on Sundays for execution. So, we feel like the program's in a pretty good spot. But what we try to do is each year we're starting over, and we kind of have to reestablish our level of performance on a lot of levels, top to bottom, which is what training camp is for.
Daniel Jeremiah once, I remember among scouts, you can kind of start to get a feel for some of the teams and what types of players they look for, to where guys will look at a prospect and say, oh yeah, that's a Ravens guy, or that's a Steelers guy. Do you feel like you're starting to get a Texans type of guy?
Well, I think what you're noticing around sports is teams are prioritizing certain criteria. So whether it's in basketball, whether it's in baseball, and what you're trying to do is say, obviously the physical attributes, and they have to be able to go out there and perform their job, but there's also some intangible elements from a work ethic, from a mindset, from a competitive, from a toughness, what's required, what works in our building. We have to prioritize that because we feel that gives us the best opportunity to put ourselves in a position to win. So I think what you're actually finding is more and more teams are looking for the same types of people with the same types of mindset. The systems are the systems. Certain players may fit a little bit better relative to what you're going to ask them to do, but from a consistency, from a dependability, from a reliability standpoint, those are the things that are going to win. So talent is important in this league. We've talked about this. I've mentioned on the show, talent is one component, but there's so many other factors that go into being a good football player, which I would say a good example when you look at somebody like Dare. So Dare is going into year 9 in his league. Is Dare the most talented player? Probably not. But is he consistent? Is he dependable? Does he execute his job, perform his job when he's asked? And I think he's shown the ability to do that for as long as he's been in the league. So he showed that in program in 2021. So what we tried to do, even on the front end before D'Amico was here, was prioritize those types of players. And our feeling was if we continue to fill the building with those players top to bottom, we're going to at least put ourselves in a better position to hopefully have sustainable success.
Okay, so when you talk about how a lot of teams are starting to look at the same types of things, I get the feeling that what you're saying is that there's less tolerance for bums than there used to be. or potential bums.
Well, it's not so much that. It's just when a player walks in a building, and you've been in plenty of locker rooms, so players are very smart, they're very perceptive. So if you're saying as a team, this is what's important to us, and a player is the antithesis of that because maybe he has some ability, then as a player you're going to really question, are we staying consistent with really truly what we believe in, or are we taking a flyer because this guy has enough talent that we think is going to translate to winning? So again, your tolerance is based on what you are willing to accept on a day-to-day basis in your program. It doesn't mean that you're not going to take a risk. You maybe want to take a calculated risk on your terms, but hopefully the infrastructure that you have put in place can absorb that. And if it's not working out, our responsibility is to make a decision and to move on because we know ultimately where it's going to end up.
Yeah. One more on that, and then we'll get to training camp specific stuff. But I know you talk a lot after the draft about programs that players came from. The two Iowa State kids, you gushed about Matt Campbell. There's other coaches, I'm sure you feel the same way. How critical is that how much does that factor in that it's a head coach in a program that you feel prepares them more for this type of environment?
You certainly put stock in that. When you look across the country, there's certain programs and coaches. When you look at what Coach Ferentz has done at Iowa, when you look what Matt's done at Iowa State, I would say what Coach Lanning is doing at the University of Oregon right now. You have Kirby, Coach Saban. So when you have an understanding, Coach Fickle in Wisconsin, when you have an understanding of what they ask of the players on a day-to-day basis, then they're prepared to a certain level. Now, they still have to be able to replicate that at our level, in our locker room, in our team, and there's going to be an adjustment period because they have less distractions or their focus is more on football and not have to worry about going to class. But we're evaluating programs as much as we are evaluating the players, and we're of the belief that programs win, so whether it's in college or whether it's the NFL level, I mean, there's a reason that the same, I could say, handful of teams are in a position on a year-to-year basis because they have well-established programs. Doesn't mean there's not going to be some turnover.
Sure.
But programs matter, and then the people that are within those programs are ultimately going to define what that program looks like.
So is a big part of this process for you this year with Nick Caserio? You know him from before, obviously, but not in this role necessarily, and not on this team, and everything else that's different. Are you still kind of getting to know this version of Nick Caserio this year?
Yeah, there's always an adjustment period, and I think as you go through your career as a coach, you go from an assistant coach to a coordinator, or a coordinator to a head coach. So, and we've talked about this, where you've been, the impact of the imprint that you put on the program, but ultimately what you're trying to do is put together, in our case, the 2025 Houston Texans offense. So what does that look like? It goes back to who are the players, what can they do, can they actually perform the job and the tasks that are asked of them? Maybe there's some things that this player does a little better than others, then you use a little bit more of that. If a player is not as equipped to handle it, then you're maybe not going to put himself in that position. But I think all of us are going back to what I said a little bit earlier, trying to reestablish our level of performance. And in Nick's case, he's working through some things from a coordinator perspective, but ultimately this is what training camp is about. It's about learning, it's about repetition, it's about making some mistakes, it's going back inside, maybe correcting, making some adjustments. So Nick's worked really hard. I think he's trying to put his stamp on the offense, and it's a collective effort from his position to the coordinators. The players all have input as well. So in the end, we're all going to rely on each other, and it's going to come down to how well we can execute in critical situations on Sundays.
We're joined by Texans Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio, live day 6 of Texans training camp. For us on the outside, Nick, one of the biggest storylines with this offense is CJ Stroud, and how this year he's got more of a level of control, we would call it, line of scrimmage, whatever that may be. How is he doing with that so far, and what are your thoughts on that? How big a difference is that for him this year?
Yeah, ultimately, the quarterback has his hand on the ball 99% of the time, unless you get Wildcat or something like that. So you want to have a certain level of autonomy, and ultimately you want to feel comfortable with what's going on your side of the ball, and then have an understanding what's going on the other side of the ball. So let's say this particular system, it's kind of a quarterback-driven system, and it's really just reaching out to people so that everybody's seeing the picture through the same lens. So the quarterback, when he has that, I would say, responsibility, he feels a little bit more, I would say, in control, and then he can make the decision and understand where the problems are. So it takes work. It's going to change kind of on a week-to-week basis. What are the issues? What do we have to deal with? But he's worked really hard. I think he's enjoyed that aspect of it, and it's only going to continue to grow and evolve as we work through camp and get into the regular season.
Nick, one of the most surprising things I said to Sean, I don't think we even said it on air, but I was reading Bill Belichick's book, The Art of Winning, and I came in on a Monday, and before the show I said, man, DeMeco and Belichick are so similar. And he looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about?
You're not wrong, I would say.
No, they have, obviously they have much different personalities, but at the end of the day, I think that the one thing that really shone through as I was reading Belichick's book, and it's something that I already knew about DeMeco, is that I think they both either naturally or work really hard at just getting rid of the BS or the stuff that really doesn't matter and just zeroing in on the stuff that genuinely does have an impact on your team.
No, that's accurate. And you guys have had a perspective of DeMeco as a player, now as a coach. He's a no-nonsense, no BS guy. He's old school. Like that's what he believes in. That's how he was trained. He's the greatest person like in the history of the world. I've been on this show, talked about how much I love him, how great of a person that he is. His priorities are right, how important faith and family is. But when it comes to football, like he has that trigger, he has that switch, and he doesn't really have time for a bunch of things that aren't really impacting winning. So the quicker we can arrive at that point, the quicker everybody has an understanding of that. Winning is hard in this league, so what you're trying to do is minimize the things that aren't going to help you win and focus on the things that that actually matter, which is work, which is intent, which is showing up on a day-to-day basis, which is being consistent and just keeping your mouth shut and working. And that's how DeMeco was as a player, and he's not really operating that differently as a head coach than he did as a player. So he has that trigger, he has that switch, he's very invested in the process, and I think the players understand that, and it's exciting to be a part of that.
Different personality types, but you agree with Seth's assessment that the two are similar.
Yeah, Seth's
in key
right
ways.
About a lot of stuff, so in this particular case, I would agree with it.
That's right, Sean. You hear that? It's going to be on my profile on social media. Seth's right about a lot of stuff. Nick Caserio.
I'm going back through some podcasts today now. Yeah, I got to go back.
Well, hey, while we're on the topic of Belichick's book, this is one thing I love to do when I read biographies or autobiographies of very successful people, is I try to pick out the advice that nobody's going to follow. Because there's always something that people want to follow the advice that's most convenient to them. And one of my favorite parts of that book was where he said that the four most important words for a leader to get really comfortable with are, he said it more colorfully than I'll say it. He used a different word, but I screwed that up. And how important it is that he said I screwed that up more than anybody else in the building, so guys can see that, take accountability for your mistakes. Doesn't mean that it's got to take accountability for your mistakes, and I'm going to hold myself to the same standard as you.
No, I think that's the essence of leadership. All of us have to make a number of decisions on a day-to-day basis in our roles. Not every one of them is going to be right. And it's okay to admit, you know what, I was wrong about that, or you know what, I made a mistake, it's not good enough, and then just really work to get it fixed. So I think when you take accountability, individual accountability, hopefully people see that and respect that, and as long as it's done in a genuine fashion. Mm-hmm. So if you're wrong, don't be afraid to speak up and say, you know what, I'm wrong, I made a bad decision, or you know what, I don't know, let me go find out the information. There's a selfless nature to that, and it's okay to show, you know what, you're human, and we all make mistakes, and that's part of life, and that's part of growing up. So I think that's, definitely a leadership trait or attribute that's important for people to possess. Sometimes people act like they have all the answers, and they want you to know about that. At some point you're going to drown those people out and not want to listen to them. So, but it's interesting. It's an interesting observation. I'd say there's certainly a lot of validity to that, just, from my perspective.
Nick Caserio joining us here.
Did he say it less frequently than maybe he presented it in the book? Yeah. So did you not hear it from his mouth as often as maybe he claims?
No, he wasn't afraid to say, you know what, I screwed that up, and just work to get it fixed. And it just goes back to accountability. Yeah. So if you're holding yourself accountable, then it's a lot easier to hold the rest of your staff and the team accountable as well.
Nick Caserio joining us here live on Sports Radio 610. So as far as stuff out here at training camp, obviously a lot of eyes right now on Nick Chubb because Joe is out, so Nick's getting a lot of run with the ones. I'm curious he's coming off an injury a couple years ago, played some games last year, got injured at the end of last year. What type of data do you guys have when you're looking at him? I'm sure there's GPS trackers on everybody. Do you guys have sort of what the baseline was for him back when he was prior to the knee injury, and how are you able to kind of measure where he's at physically to help contribute to winning.
Yeah,
for you
that's
guys?
interesting. You have a player's medical history of kind of what they have gone through, some of the different things that have happened. When they walk on campus, then we can kind of start our baseline understanding and do the testing. Where are they actually relative to their recovery? Is this an area that is too debilitating that's going to affect their training? Do we have to modify their training? And then from a tracking standpoint with all players, we're just measuring their loads, their speeds, their physical imbalances, maybe one leg relative to the other, so it could impact their training. So we're looking at that across players. We're understanding some players may be a little bit more at risk than others, just given their history.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do is just take the information we receive on a day-to-day basis here, and then over the course of camp, look, if there's a day where we feel a player maybe needs a little bit less because he's reached a certain threshold on his loads, then that's where I would say you're seeing more trends in the league in that respect. So relative to Nick's come in, he's worked hard, he's done what we've asked him to do. He's really spent the off season on his own training. I mean, I know there's a bunch of videos of him squatting like 4,000 pounds,
yeah.
But like he's always been a strong player with a strong lower body. So once a player's here, we're actually able to measure that on a day-to-day basis and just try to figure out what's the best thing to keep them as healthy as possible, understanding that, we're not going to prevent everything, but there's a certain element of risk mitigation that's involved with every player, and we're certainly conscious of that.
Okay, real quick, Seth, so to set the internet straight, just if Nick Chubb is squatting, I think it was 610 pounds.
Whatever it was.
Because it was a tribute to Sports Radio 610 is what I tweeted. He squatted so that's not necessarily – is that necessarily something that maps to what you guys are looking for in play? I mean, obviously it's impressive. I'm not trying to
We actually do a lot of single leg work.
Okay.
Yes.
I can speak from experience because I've been working with Mike Eubanks on Fridays and doing some single leg RDLs. And really what you're trying to do is create – balance, because you might find if you're doing double legs, Seth probably can speak to this, but if you're doing double leg, sometimes maybe one side or one area supersedes the other and is doing more work.
Yeah.
When you do single leg and you isolate, you kind of have a better idea. So Nick's very strong in his lower body, so I would say whatever the measurements are,
it's going to be good.
He's strong. It's going to be pretty good.
It's going to be good.
No. As a guy that went through multiple knee surgeries and injuries, that was one thing our old strength coach Dan Riley was big on, was that sometimes the training staff, back in those days, they'd clear a guy for practice, but Dan Riley, he liked to do single leg stuff with guys coming back from injuries, and the guy would be 20% weaker in the injured leg or the surgery leg, and it was frustrating for him. So he drilled that into my head over and over again. So I get excited when I hear people like you say that.
No, there's devices and technology that's available that can give you that information, and the good thing is you can show that to the players so they can see it. I think there was always when the whole data tracking technology came out, I think sometimes there was a negative viewpoint relative to players that were using it for, non-competitive or non-positive reasons. But really what you're trying to do nowadays is show the player, look, here were your measurements, here's where your load, here's why we're training the way that we are. So they have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So I think you've seen that kind of grow and evolve. There's definitely more trust on both sides. And we're not using it for anything other than what's in the best interest of the players. That's how we view it.
Sure.
Darrell Taylor intrigues me because I think, you remember Jason Babin. Jason Babin was drafted by the Texans, and it was a little bit of, I don't know if we were in the right scheme for him. And when he went off to Seattle and was able to put his hand in the dirt and be a 4-3 defensive end instead of a 3-4 outside linebacker, he really took off. And if Darrell Taylor might be a little bit of the opposite, where he did some really promising things early in his career, but in a different scheme in Seattle. And then last year was kind of a weird year in Chicago. But is there a part where maybe you look at Darrell Taylor and think this might be a better scheme fit for him?
Yeah, there's a good example of players played multiple systems. I would say Babin, going back to him, I think you're right about that. Like, he was better with his hand down. And anytime you're viewing end of the line of scrimmage players, some have the ability to play from a two-point stance and are comfortable. Some aren't as kind of ground laying from a three-point stance and really what you're asking them to do. I would say in Taylor's case, I mean, he has a lot of attributes that really translate over to our defense. I mean, he's an explosive kid. He's a good-sized kid. He's strong. He's got good get off. He's got good bend. I mean, we feel that he's potentially going to be able to help our defense in some capacity. I would say kind of complements Derek Barnett in some respects. I mean, they both play defensive end, but they're different in terms of their skill set and what they provide, but they're equally effective in their roles. So DT's had a good attitude. He runs well. He's got some explosiveness to him. Looks like he might be able to provide some snaps in the kicking game, which really you're looking more from a size standpoint, not necessarily this guy is like a special teams maven, but it just creates a little bit more versatility to your overall team. But, I think we were happy to be able to sign Taylor when we did, and because we think he's going to have a fit and role in this defense.
Yeah, well, and obviously that's one of your strongest positions with Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Being out here at practice, those two have been wrecking shop at times out here. Does it make it difficult to assess sometimes when you're watching young tackles go against guys like Danielle Hunter? I mean, obviously it's great experience for them. They're going against the best. But as someone who's having to evaluate all this and put a depth chart together, how does that all factor in?
Yeah, it works both ways. I mean, we feel like we have pretty good players on both sides of the ball. I mean, arguably Danielle and Will are two of the better defensive ends in the league. So, I mean, they have to work on what they're doing as well. Like, we can't penalize them. So here's your assignment. Okay, the big thing for us is just making sure he goes goals. I mean, this goes back to protecting the team. So just stay off the quarterback. If you win the rush, just go ahead and pull off. But from a working against one another standpoint, I mean, Ursery's going to get a lot better working against Danielle, working against Will, working against DB, working against Taylor, and that's going to hopefully make them a better player. So, I mean, Will's been having this problem probably since he's been in high school.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier in the show.
Will's a good player, and Will's actually improved in some areas, which is what you like to see in a younger player. But we're getting good work against one another, and there are plenty of times where our tackles have blocked the ends, and there's other times that the ends have beaten the tackles, and that's emblematic of the NFL and what you're going to see on a week-to-week basis.
Well, and I think emblematic of what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, the types of guys you're bringing in. I saw footage after practice the other day of Will working with Ariante after practice on, whatever. Ariante, I'm sure, went up to Will and asked him and said, hey, let's do these things. How cool is that to see? And also, as it pertains to Will, like when you signed someone like Danielle Hunter, because those two are now inseparable, Danielle and Will, it looks like, out of practice. How much of that factors in when you're looking at something like a contract for Danielle and what it's going to cost? Do you look at like, okay, not only is this guy a great player, but from what we know about him, there's an incremental effect he's going to have on the development of Will Anderson?
Yeah, look, we're trying to bring good.
Am I overthinking?
No. We're trying to get good football players in the building, and I would say in Danielle's case, I mean, we didn't have a history per se, but Chris Blanco was with him in Minnesota, so having that information, and then when the players walk in the building, it's organic. Like, we're not going to force it. Well, we're signing Danielle because Danielle, we want you to help Will.
Right.
If that works itself out that way, I think there's a mutual respect for one another because they have the right mindset, they have the right personality, and they want to help each other. And the reality is they can help each other by learning from one another and sharing information and making each other better. And that's really what we try to do. I mean, D'Amico talks about this a lot. I mean, I know it's just a phrase, but it's true. Iron sharpens iron. So, again, we're looking at the player, his overall background, his makeup, what can he do to help our football team, and when they're here, how those relationships form. Ultimately, it's up to the players, and you just hope it is organic as possible. You're not trying to force anything on anyone.
Yeah.
Sean and I were discussing during the break that Kalen Bullock almost had an interception yesterday, but he dropped it. And I was talking about my frustration at times because Kalen Bullock, he's got to be so many potential interceptions already early in his career. But to spin it in a positive way, we were talking about Jalen Knoll, because Jalen Knoll, I know drop rate doesn't tell you everything, but just by drop rate, he improved a lot with his hands through his college career. And he went from pretty bad to last year having one of the best drop rates amongst drafted wide receivers. Is that something that you have a process for, or on improving guys' hands, or is it as simple as just get out on the jugs machine?
It's interesting. I think you can improve someone's hands and just actual catching of the football. A lot of times, at least for ability to track and judge and find the ball when it's in flight, especially with their back to the ball, isn't as natural. I would say those couple plays in practice yesterday were plays that were actually Kalen was working downhill and he just dropped the ball, but there was a decent amount of steam on those. But going back to when we evaluated Kalen, like he was around the ball quite a bit at USC, and he was able to finish plays. So you have a lot of defensive backs who you can categorize them as interceptors, where they actually finish the play and get their hands on the ball. And then you have some other ones who are more PBU or just more passes defense. But your actual hands, and a lot of it is hand strength, so you can work on that on the jugs. But then a lot of it is catching and running and moving, which I would say the best drill at the combine to kind of simulate this is the gauntlet drill, because you're running full speed, you're running through the football. That simulates more of what actually happens during the course of the game. So every player's got to find, Edelman used to catch playing cards from the equipment manager just for hand-eye coordination, in the morning to make him set. And Julian had good hands, but he had drops. So sometimes it's hand positioning, sometimes it's just some are better playing the ball or tracking the ball on the move. But Kalen has shown the ability to find the ball, and a number of interceptions that he had last year were actually pretty difficult catches. We feel that he's probably going to make more of those plays than he's not. You'd like to see him catch them, but there's plenty of things that you can do to improve just the actual catching of the football.
Yeah, Nick Caserio joining us here live on Sports Radio 610. We're at Texans training camp, day 6. Nick, I know you like the investment community and you dabble in that a little Stover stock. Talk me into it or out of it.
A small cap, a blue chip,
you tell us.
A mid cap. So
look good so far.
I think he's an IPO, hopefully, right?
No, yeah. I think there's too much volatility with the IPOs. Unfortunately, I've bought into one recently that I think it's gone down probably like $20, $30 since I bought it. So hopefully that's not the case with
Can
Stover.
I interest you in this Kate Stover stock? You've already bought some.
Yeah, he's a little bit more of a steady, maybe a dividend, income type of investment. But
what have you thought so far?
In all seriousness, Cade's worked really hard in the offseason. Cade's mindset and his mentality, he cares a lot about football. He's very competitive. He's very tough. He's very smart. And as a player who hasn't played the position for that long, it's only been a handful of years, so he continues to get better. You've seen some tangible improvements, and he's going from year 1 to year 2. The hope is that younger players, you see a little bit of a growth or evolution, but we're glad Cade's on the team. I know we talked about him when we drafted him, that we were excited to get him on the team, and he just keeps his mouth shut. He works very, very hard. He cares a lot about football. When he's not here, he's probably on his farm baling hay, and because that's the type of mentality that he possesses. But excited about where he is, and hopefully his trajectory continues to move ahead.
Nick, I'm going to ask a question of you that pretty much every single guy that steps up to the podium during training camp gets. What are you working to improve on in your game this year?
A lot. I'm always trying to improve and get better. I would say I think I've always kind of taken the approach, though, just to stay here because there's a lot of things that can happen, and continue to empower the group that we have in the building and give them opportunities, whether it's in the scouting area or it's other areas that are overseeing other departments. So just being disciplined and diligent, and, I try to stay hands-off, but pick my spots where appropriate. And just to continue to provide support to whomever needs it in the building, and starting with D'Amico. And my job is to serve him and to serve the entire organization, and just continue to do that on a consistent basis, and try to make sure I stay on leg day every Friday and make sure that I don't miss any of those workouts.
There you go.
I want to make sure I maintain that level of performance.
It's interesting because D'Amico talked about how he needs to focus on developing coaches and not necessarily always being about the player development as heavily, but he's got to focus on developing coaches as well. Is that something that generally in your career, is that kind of a constant emphasis of always just, I got to get to the point where I'm training the people. I'm training the people underneath me as much as getting my hands dirty? No,
it's interesting. Every year it's a new year, and where you are in your individual evolution and development potentially could impact what your focus is on a day-to-day basis. So I think I've had the good fortune of being in multiple roles throughout my career, but I think the approach that we take, not only with the players, and D'Amico's talked about on the coaching front, but just all aspects of the organization, is bring people in, provide them the opportunity, and the mindset of draft and something that we're, I would say, focused on, and the more we can continue to do that, create more opportunities for other folks and just kind of nurture them along and steer them in the right direction. Ultimately, that's my responsibility to the organization to hopefully position this group for a number of years to come.
Nick Caserio, Texans Executive Vice President and General Manager, joining us here live. Texans training camp, day 6. Christian Harris was not on the PUP list. He wasn't on the NFI list either. He's on the roster. He hasn't practiced yet. What can you tell us about where he's at? We saw him jogging out here yesterday, so that was good.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this last Tuesday. There's a number of players that are at different stages in terms of their development relative to their health. I would say specifically in Christian's situation, the way the rules work with NFI, PUP, etc., if they're on one of those lists, there's certain parameters and limitations in terms of what they can participate in. So as a player makes progress, let's say you want to put him into a walkthrough in the evening or something like that, you just have the flexibility to do that. You're sort of keeping him alive. So you just, every case is a little bit different. So we're trying to do what we think is in the best interest of each individual player. So Christian's getting closer. He's starting to make some progress. So really, I would say that was more of a mechanical thing. Gotcha. There wasn't any funny business or anything like that. It's just trying to look at the situation. What do we think makes the most sense? You sometimes can keep a player a little bit more engaged when he's not on one of those lists for a myriad of reasons. So I'd say, again, there is a thought process and a rationale behind it. I'd say that's probably the best explanation for his situation.
Sean talked about is sometimes when a guy is put in a leadership role or becomes the veteran guy or one of the veteran guys in a position group, you can see a change in them, and it affects their individual player, but they also grow as a leader. And it's been interesting to watch Titus Howard. So from the outside looking in this offseason, and we're not there every day, but just from the things that he's said and the way it looks like he's operated, it looks like he's really leaning into or embracing becoming a veteran guy on the team and being a leader in that unit.
Yeah, Titus has been here for a number of years now, and honestly, he's probably seen as much change as anybody that's on the team. And, to his credit, I mean, he's done a number of things that are very selfless. Like, we've asked him to change positions. He's played multiple spots. He really hasn't complained and bitched and moaned about it, so it kind of speaks to him. Titus is a good kid. He works hard. He's got a good attitude. There's been some ups and downs throughout the course of his career, but he continues to work and he get better. So, we're glad he's here, and, he's played good football for us. And even going back to, my first season in 21 when he had to go out there and play left tackle, he showed the ability to do that. So, Titus deserves a lot of credit. It hadn't been easy, but I think he's really made a conscious effort to sort of work through it and try to do the right things. And the big thing with any player, and Titus included, is continue to work, continue to make progress, continue to improve, and do what you can to help the football team. And, he's certainly embraced that. He's
one of the few guys so far that hasn't really been, like, mixed and matched out of his right guard position. There's been a lot of shuffling. It felt like yesterday you guys were going with specific combinations, with different groups out there. Is that something we're going to continue to see, or is there still going to be shuffling? Not specific to Titus necessarily, but where are you at right now in that whole competition along the offensive line?
Yeah, at some point that will probably declare itself a little bit more. Probably once we get through another week here, and then maybe right before Minnesota or after Minnesota, somewhere in there. At some point, if we think this is what the group is going to be, then, all right, we're going to go ahead and let those guys work together as much as possible. The reality is we probably have 7 or 8 players that are going to factor in to the actual game day rosters. So you just want to make sure that whoever those players are going to be, they get enough reps. But we've talked about this. We feel like we have a lot of depth and a lot of competition at multiple spots. Some of it's starting to declare itself a little bit. We have, honestly, 4 or 5 starting tackles or starting level tackles. Blake Fisher, I know Trent's not practicing yet. Even if you were to take Titus out from guard and put him outside. So feel like we have decent depth there. And then inside we have a number of players, some guys that are center only, some guys that are guard only, some multi-position players inside. So I think these next 2 to 3 weeks we'll see a little bit more and we'll have a better idea and better understanding. So really at some point all these guys are probably end up playing with one another. Yeah. Eventually you want to get to the point where whoever the 5 are, from a communication standpoint, you want to be able to go out there and practice as much as possible in anticipation of being ready to go for the Rams.
I haven't adopted my undrafted rookie free agent yet. I'm going to wait until after the week that we're in West Virginia to do that. But are there any guys I should keep an eye on? Now, remind you, this ceiling or ability or anything, or even ability to make the team. It's like, okay, I love this kid and the way he works and practices and all that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to give you a twofer because they kind of travel in packs here a little bit. But Casey Osai and Jackson Woodard, from the time that they've really walked in the building, they're as diligent, and their work ethic and mindset is as good as anybody in the building. I mean, every night, at the end of the day, they're upstairs talking to Coach Ross, going through whatever the next special teams phase is, because they're in a position where if they're going to make the team, like they're probably going to have to make it in the kicking game. But their mentality, they're very consistent. And honestly, they're together all the time. So whether it's walkthrough, getting extra work with Coach Davis, spending time with Coach Ross. I know Jackson, we didn't sign him right away after the draft. He was released, then we claimed him. But it was right around kind of when a draft had taken place. But those two players have really, and we've asked them to do some different things that they aren't accustomed to doing. They've played some defensive ends. So the more that they can create some versatility for themselves, at least it's going to give them an opportunity to potentially put themselves in position to make the team.
Okay, so Seth, jot those names down. I already got mine. You know who mine is. Mine is Daniel Jackson, the wide receiver, because when the bridge,
because he's probably going to SummerSlam, so
yeah, exactly.
Knowing him.
Yeah, like you guys are doing bed checks at night at the Greenbrier. Where's Jackson? He's in MetLife Stadium. Because when they were doing the over the bridge question, they said, "What's your walkout music going to be?" And he said, "Randy Orton, Voices in my head."
I hear voices, yeah.
And I
so
said,
maybe he's going to change that to the whole
team. This guy's making the team, Nick, based on this.
Well, hopefully he can make a few more plays in practice.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's good. We found out who the wrestling fans are on the team. Have we
Omar,
done that?
That's your job.
That's Omar's. Okay, Omar's got to get me my list. Right. I want to do a little thing after practice in Greenbrier where I find out.
Maybe we can get some SummerSlam predictions while we're at it.
Oh, okay. Give me one. It's
well, it's seen his last SummerSlam match, right?
Yeah.
So I know he's a big-time actor now. So I'm sure, eventually Cody's probably going to work himself.
Him and Cody going against each other, right?
And then CM Punk against Gunther, right?
Yeah.
I watched CM came out last night and had a good monologue.
Nice little shouting match with him.
I'm a CM Punk fan. So
Drew McIntyre's trapped over in England right now.
It sounds like it. So
you got to partner with your Cleveland guy, Logan Paul. Can you get to MetLife Stadium by Sunday night?
I'm more partial to the Miz if we're going to talk about.
Okay, let him do it. That's a Cleveland guy. All right, Nick, we appreciate you stopping out.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime. Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, good chat. And
Seth, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm going to do my deep dive on Casey Osai and Jackson Woodard. Casey Osai has got a cult following amongst a few Texans fans, so they're going to be excited.
Oh, you'll get some hits on that Seth Payne YouTube channel,
baby.
There you go. Good stuff. Hey, Nick, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Great stuff.